Alright, this is going to be a review of the Wooting 60HE. Now, this is a keyboard that is super popular right now, and the main reasons for that are that people say that it is the fastest keyboard in the world, and I'm going to tell you if I believe if it is or not. But before we get into that video, like and sub, use my codes in the description, and all of that stuff. They'll save you money, but now let's get into the video. And I don't want to act like this is a perfect keyboard because it's not, and there are some flaws that I will talk about that I think a lot of other reviewers kind of skipped over or just missed. But first, let's start with the packaging. So in the box, you get the cable, obvious, which is black and yellow, and you get this little take control thing. You get a few extra switches, and you get this little, I don't know how to explain it. You get this little Wooting postcard thing that looks really nice, and how to assemble the strap. Now, getting into a few things, I'm going to get this out of the way first, a few of the features, and you will notice why I don't have the RGB on when I talk about it in a second. Let's get the keycaps out of the way. So I'm going to take off, I don't know, Q. So the reason I swapped the keycaps is these are fine keycaps, especially for the average user, but compared to something that is very high quality, just look at the thickness difference. Here's the Wooting keycap. Here's nice PVT keycaps. They're so much thicker, and yes, these are cherry profile, but you can switch the switches around and turn them cherry profile. So yeah, that is definitely a positive. Now, going on to a few other things, that's going to be the RGB. And this is where we kind of get into the first flaw, and then we'll get into the switches and obviously all of that. But here's where we get into the first real flaw. The RGB looks beautiful, don't get me wrong, but there is an issue, and I'm going to show off this issue. So I'm going to let you hear the background. There is no background noise right now. Everything is quiet. If you hear something, it's probably my PC. But now let's turn on the brightness to 100% with something called tachyon mode on, which reduces the latency. So let's see if you can hear a sound with the brightness to 100%. You probably do. You probably hear a slight buzzing, and I'll let you hear it. And I will bring the keyboard up, and you'll probably be able to hear it better. Now, I don't know what that is. Turn the brightness off. It's perfectly fine. So I don't know really what that is, but it's kind of concerning because the RGB does look really nice on this. There is a feature where, you know how in the Apex Pro, there's the OLED screen. It lets you see how far you're pressing the switch. Well, here when you press 1, it lights up, or any key, it lights up across the top row to show you your actuation point. But now leading into the actuation point, the switch has an actuation point. Okay, I just kind of took it apart. But we will get into the switch, so it's fine that I took it apart. It has an actuation point of 0.1 millimeter and a max travel distance of 4 millimeters. Now, I want to talk about the spring. So the springs are 60 grams, but you cannot replace them. As you see, they are proprietary type of springs. They're huge springs. They're almost like pen springs, but pen springs are magnetic, so you can't use those. They do sell 50-gram ones, which they had to replace for a lot of people because they sent them out and they were magnetic and they were messing with the switches. But they will be selling 50-gram springs as well if you find 60-gram a little bit too heavy. Now I'm going to put the switch back together, and also the slider is pre-lubed. So on top of being contactless, the switches are not really pingy. The springs could be lubed a little bit, but honestly, they're fine. Now, this is what the switch looks like. It's kind of got like a greenish turquoise color to it. They do use the same mold as an OmniPoint. And if you didn't know, OmniPoints are hot swappable, but they're not because SteelSeries solders in a huge LED to them. Now, the magnet that they use, here, I'll show off the magnet, is much higher quality than something on the Apex Mini or the Apex Pro. Now let's get into a few features of this keyboard. You might be seeing the Wooting 60HE 0.1 millimeter to 4 millimeters, but the Apex Pro Mini is 0.2 millimeters to 3.8. So in theory, you would think that the Apex Pro Mini is faster. Now that's not really the case because there's something called rapid trigger. So what rapid trigger does is on the Apex Pro Mini or something like that, when you want to reset a key, so when you bring it down and you want to be able to press it again, you have to bring it to about the halfway point to let it reset, and then you can bring it down. On the on the Lecker switches, all you need to do is bring it down and you can reactuate at any point. So in games that you are strafing or spam games that you need to constantly spam a switch, super useful, especially in strafing games. And also, if you don't like 60%, they have a feature where you can double tap and it will just activate the arrow keys on this bottom layer down here. Where something on the Apex Pro Mini, you'd have to press FN, then go over to WASD and tap WASD or whatever. So that is a really nice feature. And also, obviously, there's the standard stuff you get from Wooting, like analog capability, which is basically controller movement. Very nice in games like Fortnite or racing. If you didn't know, they do have this app for double movement for games like Fortnite and stuff, but it does have a delay. So having it on keyboard is super nice. Also, their software is, you can just use it on the browser. You don't even need to install it, which is something I would love more companies to do. And also, another little feature I feel like I should mention is just to recognize it. You might see these little letterings. You probably can't see it at all. Basically, all these little letterings down here are supporters. People that bought like the Legendary Edition. And the same thing, if you take a switch out, you will see that on the PCB there are like names, designs, stuff like that. That's because the people that bought the Legendary or whatever put their design on the PCB. And so, yeah. The other thing is you can have two inputs on one key. Basically, the Apex Pro Mini does have this too, where you press halfway, it'll be like F. Then the second half of the key press will be S or whatever you want it to be. Now, the thing about that is if you have a super light spring, that's going to be super uncomfortable for that even to be a feature. So I really do prefer faster spring. I really do prefer heavier springs. I think it's a myth that a lighter switch is faster. I think that's just genuinely stupid. But yeah, now another few features about this is there is a little Wooting sign there, and there is foam in between the plate and the feet are yellow and on the bottom. So there's no hollowness. You can also swap this case to any tray mount 60 case, but you can't swap the plate. The plate is steel. I kind of wish it was like aluminum, but steel, I mean, it's fine. You can swap into like Blade 60, Tofu 60, anything like that. Now the stabilizers, I'm just kind of save this for last because there's a lot of stuff normal gaming people and stuff like that don't really care about. But yeah, so the stabilizers are fine. They're Gateron plate mount. I think the reason they use them is because they probably got them cheap because Gateron manufactures the Lecker switch. So yeah. Now, Gateron plate mount, they're fine, but they do start to tick after a while, and they are pre-lubed. I would definitely just upgrade them to something like Duroc plate mount or Everglide Panda, something like that, or Novel Keys plate mount, something like that. These are not the best, but for the average person, they are perfectly fine. Now, all in all, I think everybody knows this USB-C. I think everybody knows this, but this is the fastest keyboard spoiler on the market. But also, this is something that I really feel like people who want to game but also want to get into custom keyboards, this is not considered a custom keyboard by any means, but someone who wants something like that but doesn't want to swap between keyboards if they want something for gaming or whatever would want. The switches are super smooth. They're not obviously not going to sound as good as something like lubed and because they're not mechanical switches. They do have a certain sound signature to them. I can't really explain it. It's like a very high pitch sort of noise. They kind of sound like Varmillo EC switches in a way. So yeah, but they just have a certain sound signature to them. But a custom will sound better, but for gaming, nothing has beaten this that I felt. I made the Apex Pro for so long, and I doubt the Apex Pro Mini obviously performs that much different. So yeah, that's gonna be the end of this video, but I will continue to use this keyboard. I'm gonna put it into a Blade 60 and stuff like that. But that's the end of this video. Peace.